Mr. President, thank you so much for your time today. I wanted to start by asking you, you are here in New York for the high-level UN General Assembly week. What role do you think the United Nations has to play in the world at this time when there are so many complex issues at play?
Key role. I think it should be the institution of peace. The only problem is that it's been undermined by the 193 members that compose it. I think any time the UN is engaged in peace mediation or any international activity, we usually find a solution. But right now the world is unfortunately rather transactional. This week is important because we're looking at a lot of key conflicts like Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, situation in the Middle East, conflicts in Africa. So the UN should be engaged centrally in all of them.
But many of those things, as you admitted, are difficult to overcome. There are questions from critics about the UN's credibility in being able to handle some of those global conflicts. Do you have any suggestions for how the UN perhaps can move things forward, especially in the realm of peace?
Well, I mean, many suggestions. I remember when I was foreign minister, I think somewhere around 2011, we set up a group together with the then Turkish foreign minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, which was called the Friends of Peace Mediation. So I think we should find some new thinking in peace mediation, because right now what's happening is that a lot of peace mediation is transactional. So you just have a person nominated by whoever to negotiate the peace. But if you would have someone nominated by the United Nations, then that peace would stick. Other things, I think a lot of countries want to have more agency in the United Nations. Last year I proposed that the membership of the permanent Security Council should be doubled, because we have 5 countries there now. We have 0 from Latin America, 0 from Africa, and only 1 from Asia. And I think we need more. So it's all about basically giving especially bigger member states more ownership in the system. That could be a way of reforming the organization.
Focusing on Ukraine, in recent months we've seen you taking a very central role amongst the European leaders. Why do you feel it's important to be so central in trying to push back against Russia?
Well, I don't want to inflate my role or Finland's role because we're very much in the back office. We try to help to interpret a situation, and then you ask the question why? Well, probably because we have a 1,340 kilometer border with Russia, and probably because we've had our skirmishes with Russia over the years, and we've also gotten along with Russia over the years. So what we try to do is to interpret a situation, and then if other European leaders are interested in our analysis, if Ukraine feels that we are useful, and if the United States feels that we're useful, then we are potentially having some influence. But again, it's a big boys game, and we just try to help.
Finland became part of NATO a couple of years ago in 2023. How have you seen things change since joining?
Well, obviously, I don't think we would have joined had not Russia attacked Ukraine. That then switched over public opinion in Finland pretty much overnight. And ever since, we've always been well prepared. We have one of the largest militaries in Europe, together with Turkey, Ukraine, and Poland. And in that sense, I think a lot of our allies see us as security providers rather than security consumers. We didn't join NATO against anyone. We joined NATO to protect ourselves and to protect our allies who share values with us. So Finland's role has changed in the sense that I think the geopolitical realities of Europe have moved up to northeastern Europe, and together with Poland and the Baltic states and others, we take care of our flank of things.
The head of the Finnish Armed Forces Strategic Department has said in the past they believe that Russia could attack within 3 to 5 years after the end of the war in Ukraine. Do you hold to that assessment?
Well, obviously, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, I sit on all the relevant information, operational, strategic, and otherwise. And we, of course, look at all kinds of different scenarios. But sometimes we have to understand that we live in an age of unpeace, in an age of disorder, where there will be a lot of unknown things coming at us, and we just have to learn how to live with that. the best way to prevent war is to prepare for it, and that's what I think Finland has always done.
You said recently that you thought it was a good thing that Donald Trump, the US president, was making Europe more self-reliant. Are there any coordinated European efforts underway, I guess, to move that forward?
Well, I think inside NATO we're already doing that. So President Trump and the security situation in Europe has pushed us to increase our defense expenditure from 2% of GDP to 5%. It's pushed us to do more work on defense industry. It's pushed us to work more inside the alliance. So for instance, in NATO we now have a Baltic sentry activity in the Baltic Sea because Russia cutting undersea cables. For instance, we have a Eastern sentry operation in the air because Russia is flying drones into Polish airspace and violating Estonian airspace. So we're doing a lot of things together because of circumstance. Having said all of that, as an avid transatlanticist, I feel that it's very important that the United States stays engaged in Europe.
And staying with the theme of the United States, you've spent time with the US president recently, you've played golf together, private meetings, lots of conversations. Did you have an opportunity to change his mind or calculations on anything during those meetings and conversations?
I don't think that's necessarily the aim. I think diplomacy is based on two pillars. One is state-to-state relations, where it's about values, interests, geographic location, history and culture. And then the other one is a personal relationship. And you have to understand that coming from a country of 5.6 million people, there's always a benefit in being able to have a conversation with the president of the biggest superpower in the world. It's not so much about changing one's mind, it's about changing ideas. Some of them stick, others don't.
Those personal relationships, you say, they are important. The US president prides himself on those personal relationships. How do you best manage that relationship with President Trump?
I think in diplomatic contact, it's really about human contact and emotional intelligence. I mean, you have to understand your place. When you come from a small country, you don't go around touting the magnificence of that country or telling anyone what to do. You have engaging conversations and then you see where those conversations go. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in the United States. I did my undergraduate work here. I have a lot of American friends. President Trump knows that I'm an avid transatlanticist, and I take the relationship from there. But again, I don't want to inflate it. I think President Trump is doing a good job in brokering peace around the world, and if we can have a conversation with him about that, I think that's good.
And in Finland's relationship with NATO, your country is very involved, very heavily focused on maritime security. Why is that so important?
Well, we try to focus on land, air and sea. But for us, maritime security is important because we are a Baltic Sea nation. And if you look at the map, we're almost like an island, even though we have a long border with Russia, a long border with Norway and a long border with Sweden. But the truth is that all of our trade, 90% of it, goes through the Baltic Sea. If it's cut off, we're in trouble. That's why we focus a lot on things maritime. So we have a lot of know-how of the undersea infrastructure of the Baltic Sea. We have a sizable navy, which we are modernizing right now with 4 new frigates, etc., etc. So maritime is just part of our culture and part of our geography.
I want to ask about China, because in the past you have spoken about it, I guess in the same terms of Russia, as being a potential threat. Why do you think that is, and in what area?
I think for me China is very different from Russia. China is not only an up and coming superpower, but it is a superpower. And on top of that, it's quite often a rational, strategic and patient superpower. So it is very calculative in what it does and very systematic. Whereas Russia is a superpower in decline, which is desperately trying to grasp to what used to be, and therefore has done what I would call rather reckless and strategically mistaken moves in, for instance, attacking Ukraine. So I would see them as completely different. And I would argue that right now it seems to me that it's wiser and easier to work with China than with Russia. But of course, coming from a small country, I'm also hoping for a day where not only the war in Ukraine ends, but where we can start working on a relationship with Russia from the West, with the US, etc., etc. But the world right now is a complicated place. I fully admit that. We're seeing a change in the world balance, order and dynamics. And I think we will live with this age of uncertainty for at least 5 to 10 years.
And staying with Ukraine, there has been such a rush for peace in recent months. Where do you see things going in the near term, over the next few months? Will we get peace?
Yeah, we will, step by step. But, there's one week where I'm optimistic and another one where I'm a little bit more on the pessimistic side. I guess the self-evident thing to say is that today we're closer to peace than we were yesterday, and tomorrow we'll be yet again closer. But I do think you have to sequence things. So that means that first we need a ceasefire, so basically to stop the killing. And then after that, we begin peace negotiations. I was in Kyiv a week and a half ago on Friday and Thursday and Friday. Had an opportunity to have long conversations with President Zelensky. And I know that the Ukrainians are able to sustain this war. But of course, the sooner we get it to end, the better.
You spoke about complex issues. One of the complex issues very much in the spotlight this week is the war in Gaza and the desire for Palestinian recognition from many countries. Finland has not so far recognized the state of Palestine. What played a part in the decision-making behind that?
Well, the way in which we look at it is we've always supported a two-state solution. That is engraved not only in the government's program, but also in the foreign and security policy papers that we work on. The constitution in Finland is rather clear. It is the government that proposes the recognition of a state, and it is I, as an institution, as president, who recognize it. And I know that the government is working on the modalities of how to recognize a Palestinian state. And when the time is ripe, I am sure they will give me a proposal, which I will then approve. We now see an international movement of recognition, which I think is good, and Finland has been involved in negotiating, for instance, the declaration coming from Saudi Arabia and France, and also sponsoring it. So we're going one step at a time.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.